So today I've been given this opportunity to discuss the recent ongoing conflict that is taking place in Palestine, with a particular focus on Gaza. Uh, in order for me to analyze what's currently happening, the genocide of the Palestinians that is taking place in Gaza, I firstly need to sort of analyze what Israel basically is as a state, what that entity is, what is the background of that entity, and what has led to these atrocities that are currently happening in Gaza. If I were to give you a short background of what the idea of Israel is, I would like to bring your attention to what the term Christian Zionism. Uh, Christian Zionism is something that predates Jewish Zionism, and this idea sort of solidified itself on the eve of Napoleon Bonaparte's invasion of Egypt. In 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte made this proclamation, sort of, in which he stated that he intended to create a state for the people of Israel. That is where the first idea of in the European psyche, the first idea of a need of an Israeli state comes forth. Now you may ask, why is there the ideology of Christian Zionism? So this is basically based on the idea of the millennium, or for example, the idea of the Hill of Zion, which comes in the Hebrew Bible Tanakh and the book of Psalms and Lamentations, the book of Samuel. The idea is basically based on that the biblical prophecy that Jesus Christ will come and he will establish his kingdom for 1,000 years, and then afterwards, the end of times will be ushered in. This is sort of the biblical prophecy that Christian Zionists sort of aspire to fulfill via the establishment of a state of Israel. And so, with this idea rooted in Europe, and then influential Jewish families like the Rothschilds or the Rothschilds that have their branches all across Europe and North America, we see a rise of support for a Jewish state in the United Kingdom at the time of the first, or the Jewish Prime Minister of the UK, who was called Benjamin Disraeli. So at the time of the Jewish Prime Minister of the UK, Benjamin Disraeli, we had powerful, influential people who were in the UK elite, names like Lionel Rothschild and the Prime Minister, who were advocating for the need of an Israeli state. And this sort of culminated with the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration is something, it's a letter, it's a public proclamation for a need of a Jewish homeland, and it's addressed by Balfour to Rothschild, Lord Rothschild. And he basically states that the British government wants to establish a Jewish homeland for the Jewish people. And it's a very famous document that you can go and sort of see as well. And with that, we see the sort of groundworks being laid for the coming of European Jews to what is Palestine today, to the territory of Palestine, and sort of trying to establish a state for themselves. This ultimately leads to the United Nations Resolution 181, which sort of divides the British mandate of Palestine into the Israeli occupied territories and then the Palestinian territories. As you can imagine, this was something which caused a lot of friction between the communities in Israel and Palestine. And what happened is that there was the Nakba, or the Great Catastrophe, where more than 750,000 Palestinians were forced into exile, and they had to leave their homeland because of Zionist massacres. They waged terrorist wars on the Palestinian people that were already living in the Palestinian territory before they arrived. And what sort of culminated into was that Israel ended up occupying more than 78% of the land of Palestine at that point in time. Then we sort of see that there is a declaration in 1948 that establishes a state of Israel, which is based on the ethnic and religious identity of Jews. It is by the Jews, for the Jews. And this is sort of also, you can see this in the 1952 citizenship law passed by the Knesset, or the Jewish Israeli legislature, which sort of has a double standard for the Jews and the Palestinians. The Jews have a right of return, supposedly, to their land, which they claim to be their land, which is Palestine, whereas the Palestinians have no right of return to Palestine, which was in fact their land. And we sort of see this fighting and this war that takes place, the Arab-Israeli war, and that sort of goes forward into the atrocities that Israel commits further. So before I begin to discuss the current atrocities that the Israeli government is carrying out in Gaza, I have to delineate what the Israeli government has done in the Palestinian territory and how it's divided the people over there. So currently we have Gaza, which is bordered by Egypt, and on the other side the Mediterranean Sea and Israel. We have the West Bank, which has Israel on one side and Jordan on the other. And we have the people that live in East Jerusalem, and the people that have been forced to leave Palestine at the time of the Nakba, which live in Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, and have diaspora in the United States and the UK and other European countries as well, which sort of amount to 5.7 million people in total. These are the Palestinian people that sort of enjoy different rights and different series of rights and different types of rights under the Israeli occupation. The life of a person that lives in Gaza is vastly different from a Palestinian that is living in East Jerusalem, and his life is vastly different than Palestinians that are living in the West Bank, and their lives are collectively completely different from the Palestinians that are living abroad in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Egypt. And why do I say this? It's because that before the current genocide that is taking place in Gaza, Israel had crossed the threshold of apartheid that has been set in the Apartheid Convention of 1973 and the Rome Statutes of International Criminal Court of 1998, which sort of states that wherever there is a racial group that is committing inhumane acts in order to subjugate another racial group, wherever there is appropriation and expropriation of land of a racial group, wherever there is a denial of a right of return of a racial group, that is where an apartheid is being committed. And every time the Israeli government violates international law, there is sort of this condemnation, this word condemnation from nation states all across the world. There are UN resolutions that are passed, but there is no practical effect that happens on ground. And the reason behind this is that Israel is supported by the West in all the atrocities that it commits, and it is aided by the West militarily, diplomatically, and on all fronts, as we have seen currently, where there were efforts to bring a sustainable, practical ceasefire in the Gaza in the current conflict. But all of the countries of the world were unable to do so because of the vetoes that the United States government constantly brought on the forum of the Security Council. And we sort of see this also, the apartheid that I was discussing before. As an international lawyer, I were to establish whether there was an apartheid being carried out by the Israeli government. I would use as a final nail in the coffin the example of the 2018 law that was passed by the Israeli Knesset, or their legislature, which established that Israel is a state for the Jewish people and the Jewish people alone. And this effectively marginalized the Palestinian community to it marginalized the Palestinian community entirely. And now, coming to the current atrocities that are being committed in Gaza, we have seen the massacres that took place in and around Al Shifa hospital. We saw how Israel stopped humanitarian aid from entering Gaza. We saw how Israel stopped water from entering Gaza. We saw the Palestinians being crushed by aid that was delivered via aeroplanes by the United States, by other countries. These are atrocities that are being constantly committed in Gaza, and this has led to almost 35,000 women, children, young people, the old, that have been killed by the Israeli government in cold blood. This amounts to genocide under the Genocide Convention, Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. So the acts that I have listed down that are currently taking place and are imposed by the Israeli government upon the helpless population of Gaza, this amounts to a genocide under the convention, the Genocide Convention of 1948, which clearly states under Article 2 that if there is subjugation of a population, if there is bodily harm being caused to a population, if there are measures that are taken place to stop the birth of a certain population, if there is a policy that has caused the destruction of a population, these are things that amount to a genocide which is currently taking place in Gaza. Now, at this point, when we have established that Israel is an apartheid state, there is a state of apartheid over there, and also that there is currently a genocide taking place in Gaza, what do we do as a world community under international law? So, if I were to propose something, it would be the responsibility to protect. This is a doctrine that was developed after, again, the Bosnian genocide, the genocide of Muslims in Bosnia by the Serbians. And what happened was, in the aftermath of that horrible genocide, the world community sat together in 2005 in the Global Summit of the United Nations, and they decided that there needs to be a responsibility to protect in the world community, that wherever there is a genocide, whenever there is a genocide happening, or there is ethnic cleansing, or there are massacres, it is the responsibility of the countries of the world to protect that population, and they can do it through a humanitarian intervention. This is something that can be proposed to the world community in order to make the Israeli government stop the atrocities that are happening. Benjamin Netanyahu has to be called to account. The government of Israel and their ministers have to be called to account for the atrocities, their statements, the warmongering statements, their genocidal statements that have been coming across from their media networks. And the world community needs to have a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza and Palestine. The idea of, I also like to say that a ceasefire is possible. We were almost about to get a ceasefire currently, but the word permanent was at the last minute removed from the Security Council resolution. So we need a permanent ceasefire we need a permanent ceasefire now, and afterwards there can be negotiations between the Israeli government and the Palestinian people around what the way forward is going to be. Whether they go for the two-state solution or whether they go for what was decided in the Oslo Accords, that is for the Palestinian people to decide democratically for themselves. But as of now, we need to stop the genocide that is being committed by the Israeli government in Gaza. In addition to the apartheid that Israel is committing in the Palestinian territory, in the West Bank, Israel has developed more than 300 settlements. And those settlements violate Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention, which basically delineates that an occupying force cannot forcibly evacuate a people deport a people from their land, which the Israeli government is currently committing. So all these atrocities, the apartheid that is currently taking place in Palestine, the flagrant violation of the 4th Geneva Convention, and now the violation of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. These are major violations of international law that have to be dealt with. Otherwise, international law is completely useless. If we are not able to enforce international law as a global community, we have to realize as an international world community that international law, we have to realize as a global community that international law cannot be taken to be something that is suggestive. It is enforceable, it is binding on all nation states, and we have to use it to stop atrocities and especially the current genocide that is taking place in Gaza. I hope we are able to reach a solution. The responsibility to protect still applies to all nation states, and we need a humanitarian intervention, whether that be a military intervention, whether that be through sanctions, whether that be through diplomatic means, but we need an intervention in Gaza in order to stop what is happening over there. We have to save the people of Gaza, and we have to bring aid to the people of Gaza that are starving, that are surrounded by Israeli tanks, Israeli military, and that are left at their own. We can't leave them on their own. We have to save them. And the only thing that is possible is via the responsibility to protect doctrine enshrined by the 2005 Global Summit of the United Nations. One more thing, the relationship of US and Israel. If there is anyone who wants to understand what that relationship is, I would call upon them to read the outcome of the United States and Israel, the reassessment of the United States and Israel's special relationship that took place in 2014, which the report that came out of that summit was that Israel constantly lobbies in the United States Congress. It unduly influences the outcome of the legislature of United States of America. It unduly pressurizes the United States government into supporting them at all costs. This is something which is dangerous because it enables the atrocities that the Israeli government has till now committed in the Palestinian territory, and it is unjust, it is unlawful, and it is against all human morality. It has to be stopped at all costs.